Hi, I'm Claire, and this is an online version of my connected audience talk from Develop, practical lessons on Twitch and sharing for developers. This is mostly from experiences garnered while making Dead Nation for the PS4 and stuff we did there. I apologize if the green screen's a bit flickery, my one bulb's gone out, so the lighting's a bit uneven back there. Okay, so who am I? I'm a programmer designer. I worked on a range of titles. I've got a real passion for social experiences, and by that I mean real social experiences. I've been pushing a lot of online features for quite some time, and I've been pitching crazy ideas for years, so I've got a reputation for slightly off-the-wall stuff. And I've now recently started as a senior online consultant at Sony in Europe, so that's very cool. Okay, so designing for Twitch, why you should care, designing for video, which is something I think every single video game needs to do these days, designing for interaction, which less need to do, but it's a whole new design space, so it's very interesting to talk about. And finally, something I like to call the purple rule. So Frankerz is coming. If you're online, you know this, but the stats are scary, and they're only ever getting scarier. The bulk of net traffic is Netflix, YouTube, and Twitch. Twitch is 3 or 4 depending on which level you look at it. And Twitch's viewing hours are actually peak viewing, like their peak viewing hours are peak television hours. People are replacing their television viewing with Twitch viewing. The engagement rating on gaming videos on YouTube and Twitch is significantly higher than most other categories. Content creators who weren't making gaming content have moved over to making gaming content because of how profitable it is. The low cost of production combined with high engagement really returns a lot of revenue. And this is just a growing market. It's just going to grow, 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 and grow. And if you're interested in some of the social phenomenon behind Twitch and YouTube and that kind of stuff, I recommend you Google Generation C. There's been some papers published around that title and around that name. But as I say, Frankerz is an emote that has a long, interesting history to dig into. As I say, Twitch has its own whole subculture, and you really have to approach this like any other unique market in that you can't just go in there blind and think it'll just work. So whenever I tell people, hey, people love watching other people play video games, they go, what? Man, that sounds stupid, that sounds retarded. But if you've ever crowded around an arcade cabinet, you know that experience. If you've ever sat on the sofa and watched a friend play through Final Fantasy, you've seen them do that, and that's really great. You play board games or card games, most of the time you're actually idle waiting for your turn, and you know, in that experience, that shared experience of the game space. You know, we like to socialize around activities, be they watching football, having coffee, or watching video games. And one of the other big factors is in the modern narrative, where Hollywood always has the good guy winning and a lot of the storytelling techniques are becoming more sophisticated, are almost predictable. Watching Twitch and watching someone play a video game is really exciting because someone can be right at the precipice of victory and then have it taken all away from them, destroyed in the blink of an eye because of a bad move. And it's the same thrill you get from watching live sports. You don't know how it's going to go. You don't know if that guy flying that plane is going to crash into the wall, or you just don't know. And it's that intensity and that excitement that make live games so much more interesting. And I think one of the reasons why, as a pure narrative experience, it offers so much interest. So designing for 2 viewers is a really critical problem that some games have already started solving. The player is going to focus on their core game state. They're going to look at all the game critical information, and everything's just going to fade into the background. We've actually been kind of blessed with game UIs because we get away with shoving loads of stuff in the corner and doing all sorts of messy bits and bobs because the game is so tunnel vision that we can get away with tons and tons of tricks. Whereas the viewer, because they're not in that flow state, and they're not going to get into that flow state because they don't have the interaction loop, are actually looking at the full screen, and they need something of visual interest throughout the screen, and they really need to see the big picture. So you really, throughout your design, need to think about the two audiences, the one that's engaged in the flow state, the one that's after the game critical information and wants clean visuals, and the viewer who wants the full big picture. They want the spectacle, they want something interesting to see. So another problem is that when you're dealing with online streams, most people aren't going to tune in from the very start. They're going to be without context for the start of the game. I always say they need to be able to read the board. So classically chess, if you look at chess, other than whose turn is it, you can tell everything from the state of the board. And you can normally tell whose turn it is by whose hand's hovering over the board. So it's actually fully formed then. So you've got to see what kind of context would the player get if they dropped into the middle of your viewing session. You don't have to give them everything, but you have to give them enough of a lifeline that they get onto it. But then there's the other issue, is that they might not have played the game. But that's actually where you're somewhat blessed. The viewer's context and the player's context are different. The player can have a very in-depth understanding of what the video game mechanics are, how they interact, all the nitty-gritty details, whereas the viewer only needs the high level. The classic thing I would say is you don't need to understand the offside rule to enjoy football. You just get told, hey, if it's on the left side of the field, it's good, the right side of the field, it's bad. If it goes into the net, it's a goal. You know, you don't need to understand the nuance of how to play football to enjoy watching it. Likewise, League of Legends, which the screenshot is there, you can just look at the team score. You can glance at the mini-map there and see all the details, you know, just see, oh, how much is blue and how much is red. You can get a nice little overview. Things like critical strike and stuff pop up, and you very clearly, without the context of the in-depth game mechanics, can see good and bad and just see how that reads on your game. Basically, when you're looking at your game design, think about the video presentation and think, can someone see which side the ball is on? It's a nice little basic reminder question. Now, high quality streams are always going to get more attention, and you should always try and deliver high quality streaming. However, the reality of streaming is that something like 40% was on mobile, and that was an old stat. I haven't been able to find more recent stats on that. People more and more are watching on a second monitor or are watching on a mobile device. Now, you do get some high engagement on big screens and full resolution and such, but there is a large portion of your viewer base who are going to be watching at a lower resolution and often on a mobile device. And they're going to be interested in the chats. The chats are often going to take up a huge portion of their attention. What you need to do is you need to take some footage of your game and encode it down to 240p. Just see how your game reads. I won't go super in depth into encoding, but basically there's some quick things I can tell you, which is if there's any kind of panning motion, that's actually encoded very well into video. So something like an RTS or a platformer, the sideways movement of the camera actually gets encoded very well, unless there's a lot of background noise or a lot of changing to the image. But then another thing is that any high contrast vivid colors work really well, is because when they get encoded down, they still keep their core shape and that contrast. So brown palettes, you know, Gears of War style palettes, are going to look really shit, and they're going to get all blocky and muddy and blah. So in a way, Twitch and videos have actually been a resurgence for visual interest, for that colorful palette, for that unique art style that you can recognize at a glance. It's been really, really interesting. As I say, the only way to know is to really encode your game down to 240p, upload a video to YouTube maybe, and just see it at the lowest resolution and just see what it looks like. Okay, so one of the big things when designing for streamers is you need to give them space. I always say to people, if you look at a modern television channel, no one's got an opaque logo on the screen anymore. You know, everyone's got a transparent logo that's there occasionally. And as I said before, we get away with a lot because the game is so narrow tunnel focus, so we can get away with cluttering up the screen. The viewer's going to notice those things. So Spelunky, a year or so after its release, maybe 2 years, released the Pro HUD. Now this was initially because some people were having trouble speedrunning, and there was some spiders who were being hidden behind UI elements and bits and bobs like that. But it was also a massive boom to streamers. So what you'll see is at the top there is the traditional UI, and then optionally you could turn on the Pro HUD. Now the first thing the Pro HUD does is get rid of all the static craft, all of those UI elements that don't really tell you anything, all that scroll work, and they shrink down the critical information, because while a viewer may be interested in how many bombs I have, it's not a moment-to-moment key bit of information. It's key to the player, but to the viewer it's an additional bit of information that they can seek out and they can look in the corner. So it doesn't need to take up a lot of space. It's not visually interesting to look at the number 4 all the time, right? But then also it's added additional context information, so you can see the timer, you can see, is this person on a speed run, is the ghost about to show up, what kind of state are they in. And also, because 4 levels of Spelunky look identical in each zone, it tells you what part of the zone they're in. So they're in 1-1 at the moment, they've just started playing. And another critical piece of information, that little mask tells you this is a daily challenge. That's really important, because the amount of time someone will drop into a stream and say, oh, is this a daily challenge? Or if you're thinking about a racing game, is this someone playing career, or is this someone playing a single race mode? You just think about how that kind of information is conveyed. If you have any mode information that you can convey through a change in the UI. It could be as simple as changing a color, it could be as simple as changing an icon. Little things like that. But primarily, you want to give space to the streamer. They're going to want to put on a camera overlay like this. They're going to want to put on maybe some image overlays, subscriber pop-ups, sponsor images, call-outs. They're going to want to bring a lot of their craft in, so you need to get your craft out the way. Also, think about giving a UI scanning option, or the ability to turn the UI off entirely. It may not be the ideal way to play, but some streamers may prefer it. Ultimately, streamers know their audience better than we ever can. They may be playing your horror game because it's funny as fuck to play. So the thing to think about with streamers is there's 3 core markets. There's the pro market, the hobbyist market, and the casual market. Now the casual market has no income. They want the one button solution. They want the simple solution, and they're going to have maybe 1 person, maybe 10 people watching their stream. They're looking for a no fuss, no hassle way of streaming with their friends and showing off to their friends. They have no interest of going in any kind of after audience or after money in any real way. And that's honestly the bulk of your market. So you need to make it as easy as possible to stream and to use services like this, or to capture video, because when these casuals capture video and upload it to YouTube, that's actually where a lot of people see the content. So you need to make it so your game looks good easily, naturally, if it's captured with YouTube, and it doesn't require a lot of fidgeting and mixing of colors or gamma palettes to get it all right. You're gonna get some person's just quick YouTube video capture, and they're going to throw it up into YouTube. How does your game look? Shit or good? Then you're going to get your hobbyists. Now your hobbyists are very interesting, because this subscriber button, to get that, you need to have 500 concurrent viewers on a frequent basis, or a very large number of YouTube subscribers, in which Twitch will make an exception. If, say, a prominent YouTuber is arriving onto the channel and they want all those features. So the hobbyist has a pretty big audience base. The engagement numbers and everything, they get good numbers. And they're earning some money from Twitch. They're not paying their rent, but they're earning some money. But the interesting thing about this group is, while some hobbyists have full-time employment, a lot of hobbyists are actually 16 to 25-year-olds. A lot of them are college students, things like that. And so while this income is not huge, it is actually really big to them. There's a psychological factor at play, because it's like their first paper rounds or whatever, because they're not paying rent and stuff. This actually seems significant and something they enjoy doing. So they produce a lot more content than is financially viable. So they actually are the workhorse of Twitch, and they're actually where the most viewing hours are spent. They're not going to have the big numbers of the big channels, but they're like the firmament, if you will, of Twitch. And also, they're the most important to engage, because while your pro is going to be using dedicated hardware and stuff, there's a good chance your hobbyist is going to be streaming your game using a software solution, using the kind of tools that you can provide them. And there's this interesting phenomena that when they have a breakout stream, you know, people tend to have one breakout stream or one breakout YouTube video. If that's around a game series, right? So if they're playing XCOM, or if they're playing StarCraft, or they're playing some silly horror game or whatever, and they get that, and they're like, okay, wow, this influx of viewers, right, has a natural affinity for the game that was involved, but also the streamer has a positive feeling towards that game because it's kind of that thing that got them their boost up. And whenever they lack confidence, or whenever they have an anniversary or celebration, they often grab onto your game like a safety blanket, and their community reinforces it because the community's core was established by that one big stream around that game. So you've actually won yourself, as a developer, a very dedicated following around your game that's maybe going to return to your game every few months, maybe a year or so, and you've introduced a very long tail there. And when a streamer is doing a stream 6 months later or a year later, you're going to see residual sales from that. So if you can actually get into the hobbyists, and if you can do something really awesome for a hobbyist, there's a lot of really big pull there. And as I said, loyalty factor cannot be underestimated. It is where you strike gold on Twitch and YouTube. That's where you get the real big things. I mean, the amount of streamers who got big doing Minecraft and then constantly return to Minecraft content because of that, and then there's this just natural cycle of feedback there. And you know, once you get up to a certain level, then you raise into the on the game rankings. And the way Twitch works is when you deal with pro streamers, which we'll get to now, and popular games, because you have so many people watching, more people watch. It's this flocking behavior where people flock to popular games and flock to popular streams. I know it's kind of crazy, but it's just the way the sorting and the content discovery works on Twitch at the moment. So your pros, they're part of multi-channel networks. You know, they're going to have big boys like Disney behind them. They're going to primarily be earning their money through sponsorships, through big ad deals, through those kind of deals, whereas your hobbyist is going to mostly be getting from ads and donations and things like that. Interestingly enough, the whole field of where the money comes, it gets more and more complex with the introduction of Patreon. Kickstarter now is a big source of income, and now YouTube's actually experimenting with a model of fan funding, where where you actually directly contribute to the YouTuber. And obviously there's a subscribe button, which is one of those direct supports, which is, again, one of the reasons why so many Twitch streamers have been able to do it full time, because advertising is just nowhere near as lucrative. So yes, your pro streamers are part of a big team. They have a team supporting them. You know, they've got moderators in their channels. They've got someone handling their streams. They're using dedicated hardware. They've got a very professional setup. So about giving streamers power, you know, what can you do to enable the game streams to look as good as they can? Well, as I said, the bulk of streamers don't know what they're doing. The bulk of streamers are going to be the casuals. So the first thing you can do is implement the Twitch SDK. It's not as hard as you think. And that will give you the ability to basically turn on one-button streaming. And also, if you're embedding streams in your game, then you're pushing a new discovery content channel. So people who have access to the game are more likely to watch streams of the game, which are more likely to push those streams up. And remember the flocking behavior I talked about earlier? Well, if you get that kind of stuff in your game, you're going to push it and push it, and you're more likely to get that critical mass you need to get that Twitch explosion that you're looking for. So again, the SDK is very easy to implement, and you can do some very cool bits with the SDK that I'll come to in a bit. But also the API half is very interesting. Any streamer who has any kind of attention relies on IRC bots to moderate their channel, and they rely on the APIs. But now you can actually push a lot of stuff through there. You can hook up to your multiplayer servers. You can help set the title. You can provide quick buttons to deal with moderation, to respond to chat. There's all sorts of things you can do with the API, and if you dive into it, it really is quite powerful. And IRC, which is the backbone, is an old technology that's very reliable, can be done very cool stuff. But remember, always that Twitch is a moving platform. The hosted content feature, which was recently introduced, is an example of changes to the platform. And now with the acquisition of Amazon, more changes are on the horizon. So always remember, if you're committing to Twitch, you are committing to another service that is likely to change its API occasionally, but is also, as a community, likely to change on a frequent basis. So here's the big secret sauce. Here's the thing I talk to everyone about. The secret weapon, the render target. If you're encoding through the SDK this Twitch stream, you're basically encoding a render target. That render target usually just happens to be what's on screen, because that's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to stream the game. There's no reason, though, why it has to be what's on screen. For instance, that conversation we had earlier about UI, you could capture the render target before you apply the UI and apply a stream-specific UI and maybe overlay the camera image and little bits of details like that. And that is nearly free, especially if you're using technology like NV Encoder from NVIDIA. You can do some great things. And always remember, you're going to have latency on the upload to the order of 15 seconds, which we'll go into later. So if you have to delay this by a frame, it's not the end of the world. In fact, in the scheme of things, the player is probably not even going to notice that the stream's been delayed by 1 frame, or even 2 frames. And then if you're delaying by 2 frames, can you combine those and anti-alias those in a nice way? There's some interesting things you can do. But then take it the next level. There's no reason why, if you're playing a racing game and the player's sat inside the car, that the stream needs to be sat inside the car. You can use cinematic on-track cameras to track the action and give the stream a much more exciting view. You can give more information, maybe get rid of the fog of war, or maybe adjust the gamma, because the player is playing a horror game and they're all in the dark or whatever, but maybe the audience wants that little bit of knowledge. Maybe the audience wants to have that little bit of smarts above the player and see, bits highlighted. Maybe you can provide some context through the render target and the alternate view. So there's some really interesting things here, and I think this is going to become a real big factor, something that we can really do a lot of cool stuff with. So let's quickly talk about the structure of a game, what's exciting to play and what's exciting to watch. So at the start of a StarCraft 1 match, you had a few workers and you had to start them mining, and you had to actually do a few little bits and bobs at the start and build a few extra workers. But now the start of StarCraft 2, what they did is they said, oh, here's a few extra workers, and we told them to auto-mine already, and we did it optimally for you. So that removed a little bit of the craft at the front, and removed a bit of mechanical stuff that was no fun to watch. But then you do need a little bit of dead space at the beginning, because the commenters are going to fill up, the introductions are going to be there. If someone's just streaming on their own hoof, you're going to have that sensation of the start of the match, people starting to watch the stream. There's a natural little bit of build-up, very short, little bit of build-up. But now here's the first interesting thing. When the player sends out a scout unit, it's not actually that exciting for the player. It's a rather trivial decision, whether to go clockwise or anti-clockwise or diagonal. They know where the spawn points are, and it doesn't really matter what they choose. But to the viewer, it's critical, because the viewer sees the other player's point of view as well in a stream. And they're like, oh, okay, so they sent 2 diagonals. Oh, they're going to meet in the middle. Or, oh, 2 counterclockwise, they're going to meet there. Oh, they just missed each other. It's an artificial excitement about something that's not that critical, but it gives the viewers something to focus on, the commentators something to talk about. So it's really interesting there. Likewise, when the first conflict happens, it's usually of no consequence. It's small beans in the grand scale of things. It doesn't matter that someone lost a worker here or there, especially at the professional level where you're slicing and dicing things to the narrowest extent. But the audience gets really worked up because there's a little bit of excitement they can focus on. At this point, the player's spamming their mouse finger and they're thinking long-term strategy and psyching out players and all that. But the audience is enticed into the moment. And you get to the meat of the game. The meat of the game is very interesting and holds itself up. But then you get to the end. Now, trying to decide computationally, through a set of rules, who's won a StarCraft match is quite difficult. So you have to go with quite a harsh condition, which is all the buildings have been destroyed, and there's a few other caveats and blah, blah, blah. But it's really dull once we know who the victor is to the computer knowing who the victor is. It's a dull killing off process. So the communities then stepped in and introduced the concept of the GG, which many tournaments enforce, and there's a whole structure around it. But the key lesson is here, community will often solve problems for you, and you need to be willing to adapt, and you need to give that kind of flexibility. The amount of games I've seen that if you surrender, actually break the flow, like make you leave the multiplayer session or party, or they break the tournament structure or the league structure or whatever. They're not designed to gracefully deal with this player input. So just think about that and think about how you can deal with those kind of endings. We don't want to deal with the dull stuff. Okay, so Twitch loves YouTube and YouTube loves Twitch. It's true, Amazon has acquired Twitch. However, these two still work very well together. And I doubt that's going to change anytime soon just because of how the communities are intertwined. It would be Amazon shooting itself in the foot. So at the moment, if you go live on Twitch, there's actually an annotation on YouTube that'll tell all your people to come watch your Twitch channel. So that kind of interconnectivity. But also, almost every Twitch streamer has a YouTube channel, and they record local high-quality video, and then they want to put it up onto YouTube. So now, if you're doing any kind of streaming solution, think about giving the option of recording a high-quality version locally, something that's not going to be hit by bandwidth and such, especially now that Twitch has changed its archiving rules. And they might lose internet connectivity or something like that. You want to give them that option, right? Don't worry about hard drive space. Tell them how much a minute takes. Give them a low disk space warning when it happens. Give them options to limit. But primarily just let them do it. People understand what a hard drive is. People understand how much space video takes. One word of warning though, never ever throw away video. The one thing that will make a content person rage more than anything is losing what they consider good content. And let me tell you, once something's gone, it was the best minute you ever recorded, because in your mind it just goes better and golden and shines and sparkles in the daylight because, oh my God, I was magnificent, just no one saw. So be sure how that's going there. And again, coming back to that lesson I said earlier, if you design for a good Twitch experience, you're designing for a good YouTube experience. And this is how people are going to discover your game, especially after that first launch window when they rely on press and previews. After that, they're largely going to rely on Twitch and YouTube. When someone Googles your game, right at the top of the Google results, there's likely to be a YouTube video. So think about how you perform on the video stage. Okay, onto the really exciting stuff. This is not something everyone wants to do, but this is really interesting. Interaction. Okay, so you've all seen Twitch Plays Pokemon, and if you haven't, I recommend you look at this phenomenon. One thing I always say to people when I give this talk is how many people in the audience watched Twitch Plays Pokemon for the few days it was in the news. And to those people I say, you did not see Twitch Plays Pokemon. It is a thriving community with lots of cool little details. People making Google Docs about why pushing down in battle is statistically bad thing to do, and by going down you're worshipping Dome, and there's huge memes, and it's wonderful. So I encourage you to go onto Reddit and look at Twitch Plays Pokemon, or just look at some of the really well-written articles on the phenomenon, because there's been some really good documentation after the fact. But anyway, moving on to actually how can we do it in our games. Well, first of all, how do you do this kind of matching, right? So the first thing, IRC backbone. So IRC is a very old chat technology, very reliable, lots of good documentation on writing IRC bots and integrating with IRC. So most of these interaction systems rely on string matching the string pickle peanut. In Dead Nation, we match the string #A or #B because we want to get away from as language specific, because there's a phenomenon where people will play the game in English, but they'll be streaming in German, they'll be talking in German. And your game just might not support the streamer's language. Likewise, you want to keep it short and punchy because someone might be watching on mobile and doesn't want to type in pickle or peanut. They want to type in just #A or #B. Also, we used a special character, so we didn't get accidental matches. You can also direct message to players. Basically, it opens a private channel between you and the player, and that actually does some really interesting things, and you can actually have a direct interaction with one of the viewers on the stream. So some technical realities. Okay, how this works is you encode video locally, okay, and there's technology like constant frame rate where you're actually buffering to account for different frames taking more time to encode or being different sizes of encoding depending on how complex the frame is or how simple the frame is. Also spikes in the CPU, spikes in the network latency. So you've got all this buffer building up locally, right? First bit of buffering. Then you upload, and the latency on the upload is actually pretty fast. But then when it gets to Twitch, they've got to encode it into multiple different versions: mobile, low quality, medium quality, and then source, which obviously doesn't need encoding. And then you've got the global CDN, which has to push it to all over the world, because you're not just streaming to someone in your city, you're streaming to someone everywhere. And so Twitch has its local server buffer. So it's a Twitch buffer, and then it's delivered to the mobile phone, or it's delivered to the web browser, or it's delivered to the PS4. Now, when that happens, especially if it's the web browser or the mobile, you've got another buffer, and this is now accounting for mobile connectivity or just shitty web technology, and that buffer can actually build up over time quite badly to when you F5 a stream, you'll actually get back a second or two. But the long and short of it is, end to end, it's about 15 seconds. Sometimes you'll get faster than this, but 15 seconds is a good rule of thumb. But it gets worse. If I send a chat message because I saw something on stream, that chat message is near instantaneous. Short enough we don't have to worry about. However, because that chat message has to go back to me and then has to be encoded, the feedback loop is about 30 seconds, which is a bit of a killer. However, I will say to people, Louis C.K., the shittiest cell phone in the world is a miracle, because television channel often don't get 30 seconds. The TV news is often operating on a minute or 2 minutes. Live sporting events don't often get 30 seconds. So, be like really grateful. And this is something that most people access for free that's just killer. And don't expect it to get much better, because while we can trim the buffers here and there, it's really pushing the limits of what can be done. Okay, so you've got that 30-second feedback delay. That's the hardest problem when you're designing for, right? Then also remember, Twitch works because it's easy. You don't want a large onboarding experience for your interaction. People are watching the stream, they're not signed in, then they sign in to follow you, or they sign in to chat, okay, or they register and chat. I recommend you look at the Twitch register flow. It's very simple. And then they can just type and rant and rave at you, and it's just blah, blah, blah on the keyboard, enter. And that's very minimal. I mean, I can go from not watching a stream, not logged in, to signed in and ranting at you in the space of 30 seconds. And there's no commitment, there's no big hoo-ha, it's just in and go. So your interaction should be easy as well. As I said already, it's an IRC chat backbone. It's the biggest IRC chat network in the world. Chat is rate limited, but if you're implementing the SDK and API and you're using authenticated connections, it's not rate limited, or it's pretty much not rate limited. And it's really fast, much faster than your channel. So you can do some very interesting things with it. But before we go into what you can do with it, what shouldn't you do with it? So there's always the elephant in the room when we talk about social, which is Facebook. So some key things I'm going to go over. Friends are not booster packs, and audience should never gate. Okay, people can game the system very easily. IRC bots are not hard to write, and if you're telling someone, oh, you don't get this feature unless you have 100 people watching, God, that sucks. That's terrible. Why would you do that to someone? It just makes them resent it. They're like, oh, I have to get viewers. No. And if you make friends booster packs, or if you make the viewers booster packs, right, then they're just going to be trying to get viewers because they want them to help them out on this thing, and they're going to be playing the game, they're nagging their friends, can you just sign on and help me with this thing? It's not the booster pack. It's, you shouldn't be, hey, here's a health pack because, I'm watching, or here's a booster because you got 200 viewers. That kind of stuff's not going to work. You need to respect the player and respect the audience. Okay, you need to respect their time and their intelligence. A perfect example of something I would say is not a very good Twitch mechanic is Tomb Raider implemented a revival mechanic which when Lara died, the audience could revive her. No other interaction. I only get to interact when the player's failed. It's infrequent, and all I can do is nothing or help the player out. So really, why would I help the player out unless I'm really bored? You know. So there's that. Okay, that's what you shouldn't be doing. And basically think, would Facebook do it? And if the answer is yes, don't do it. Okay, so what's good interaction? So the first rule is the Reddit rule. You have to be an ass. Okay, you have to have the ability to ruin the player's stream. I know that sounds wonky, but basically the amount of times you'll have this conversation where you're like, here's core feature X that we should do, and then you'll be in the design meeting and someone will turn to you and says, but that could ruin the play, or that could ruin the experience. And you've got to get over that mental hurdle, because the viewers are engaging, and if their interaction can't ruin the stream, then it's not really interaction, is it? It's just peanut gallery. So you need to give them the ability to ruin the stream. It is the streamer's choice to interact. You know, they're turning on the interaction features. You know, they're going into interaction streaming mode. They're signing up for this. So let them sign up for it wholeheartedly. When I watched Penny Arcade play Dead Nation, their audience basically threw Rotten Tomatoes at them because they have a very negative relationship with their audience, a very like controversial relationship with their audience. And they had to actually start win over their audience. And at first they were just swearing at their audience and stuff. But then they actually started engaging, and the conversation became very positive because there was an influence loop there. There was a feedback loop there. You know, the audience mattered. They wanted to interact. Also involve the audience, not just in their interactions, but into the game itself. When we did Dead Nation, whenever you voted, we actually made it so your name went above a zombie's head. And this was amazing watching this on stream, because what would happen is someone would be streaming, someone would vote, and they're like, oh my god, I'm in the game. And like the streamer would go like, they would see the name and they would all of a sudden register, oh wait, I've got viewers watching this, you know, and they would put a name to a face, and they would be like, oh well, this is one of the people who always watches me, I don't want to blast them in the head, or you know, that's a friend, or damn you. And the other side effect is because the player this game was ruined or helped by the audience. When the audience helped, you don't want to shoot them. When the audience was negative, the player shot them. But now here's the interesting thing. Because the audience was there, the player, in the majority of streams I watch, transferred their negative emotions to the audience member responsible, not to the systems at play. Finally, remember your audience. Memory is cheap, it's only ever becoming cheaper. There's no reason not to remember who was partaking, who was watching the stream. And you know, you can store that up and do interesting things with that. Also, separate out any kind of achievements or leaderboards, because this is going to get gamed. We've already spoken about how easy it is to game IRC bots, and you don't want to force people to stream. You don't want to make it so it's beneficial to stream. Also, you don't want to make it so it's detrimental to stream, you know, so separate those out. Okay, so some first generation interactions. This is stuff that required no integration in game, no direct game interaction. So raffle giveaways, still a big part of Twitch, where basically people say follow and subscribe and do all these things and I'll give you the stuff, right, codes and whatnot. Viewing leaderboards. Remember how I said remember the audience? This is really fascinating. So what will happen is they'll actually record how long an audience member's been watching a stream, you know, so I've been watching for 2 days or whatever total, and it'll remember between sessions and everything. And this also had a secondary effect of some people don't have money, but they're really dedicated viewers, okay? Might just be because they don't have a credit card, might be because they legitimately don't have any money. And this allowed another kind of engagement and another kind of loyalty to register with the streamer. Remember how I said it was IRC and chat? Well, that means that a lot of text games from IRC has actually come across, and one of the most popular bank heists is basically like this little bank heist that goes on in chat and people play separate from the game. But then the one that got me really interested a few years back was Spelunky Death Roulette. So this is a thing where the streamer has to actually say what's killing them, you know, so it's not plugged into Spelunky. And the audience member would be given $100 or whatever, fake money, to vote on what would kill them. okay? And there would be like this fake voting system, always bet on spikes. But what would happen is people would vote and then be like, oh, no, 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 and it would just give them a bit more engagement. And whenever I watched the Spelunky stream that was using the Spelunky death roulette, it was just so much more exciting, and I was just rooting for it so much more. You know, it was a really interesting experience, and the first one that made me realize, hey, there's something here that could really do some cool stuff. So we go on to the second generation. Now I put voting and Dead Nation at the top because Dead Nation was the Dead Nation interaction was concepted and hell even implemented way before Twitch plays Pokemon. Damn it! I've been talking about this stuff for years, but it never saw the light of day until afterwards. Because hey, that's the process you go through. So in Dead Nation, we had a voting system where to get around the 30-second feedback loop I spoke about, we actually had a delayed vote where we got everything together. Now, when the vote started, very important, we said straight away in chat what you were voting on. So you didn't have to wait for the vote to come up in the video. You could see it in chat. People would vote to cripple the player, to spawn a mini boss. They would vote to give them some ammunition or grenades or to boost a stat, all that kind of stuff. Then what happened, the player, you know, zombie names above their head and everything, and then boom, 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 and it would rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And we gave a lot of control to the streamer. You know, they can change the length of the vote, the delay between votes, all that kind of stuff. And it worked really well. Whenever I watched those streams, the engagement was great, and it was really, you know, it really made streaming Dead Nation a lot more fun. And we made it a separate game mode, so you could stream speedruns or you could stream normal content without turning on the engagement. We did make one mistake in that when we first launched it, whenever you died, we didn't reset the effects. So if the audience was negative to you, but then they turned around, the feedback loop was too slow. It took too many votes to swing back into the positive. So what we did is when you died, and we patched this, when you died, we actually just reset all the effects. But then there's another thing you could do, which is directly map the controls. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's basically what Twitch Plays Pokemon did. Now, Twitch Plays Pokemon is still going, so I recommend you look at it, and as I said, research it, because it's a fascinating topic. You see the screen at the top is day 7 of Twitch Plays Pokemon, because that anarchy democracy bar where people vote to take things to a voting style, very much like Dead Nation, or an anarchy style, was actually introduced a few days into the stream. It wasn't originally there. Originally it was always anarchy. So how it works is basically it just takes one of the inputs from the frame that is the most recent frame, and then it says, oh, okay, I'm taking that as my button input, and it just maps that to a button input. Now notice in the more advanced version of Twitch Plays Pokemon, you actually see there that white bit there is highlighting which input was selected. So there's a little bit of feedback there, you know, telling people your input matters, very important. But then it also extracts things like the actual Pokemon, what their levels are and stuff, and there's a betting mechanic and all sorts of kind of crazy stuff. So it's worth looking at Twitch Plays Pokemon. They did some fascinating things, and the fact it is Pokemon was one of the reasons I think it exploded so hugely. Also, another example is daylight's triggering of events. I've put a little star against there because I've not yet seen a good stream of it. I'm familiar with all the features, but basically what you do, you type in a word and it triggers a scare. But there wasn't enough AI, or I think maybe not enough design in there, so the scares were a bit all over the place, and as I say, it didn't seem to work. The idea is solid though, this idea that you're turning the audience into the AI director, you know, to control the pacing. But it just needs a bit more massaging. But it's an interesting concept. So third generation interaction. Now I say third generation, all the second generation is still really good. Most people haven't even hit second, and I still think everything from first and second will still be valid in the future. I'm just using these as iterations of how weird and how wonderful you want to go. So third generation, you could turn the viewers into players. Notch did this with ball kickers, a quick little game he mocked up where loads of little footballers are on the screen. You see the screenshot there, and you control an individual little dude by going, you know, northeast, southwest, and whatnot, and that was it. But if you're doing a quiz show, there's no reason why the audience can't partake. So interesting, cool stuff there. So viewers as players is an interesting mechanic to explore. Then you've got viewers as content. So viewers as content is very interesting. You can basically, what if, I don't even need to say what if, Choice Chamber exists. It's a Kickstarter that happened. Choice Chamber is extreme, wild, off the edge, but basically the audience controls everything. Level generation, you know, what monsters fight up, what kind of style there is, all the encounters. The audience is basically generating content, and that goes extreme and wild, right? But there's also no reason why the audience couldn't say, in Diablo, for instance, oh, let's make it like a windy passageway for the next thing, or let's make it a you know, wide open space. There's no reason why you can't take bigger, more thematic decisions rather than those little finicky decisions, right? But also you could say, hey, well, disable shotguns on the next map or whatever. The audience could provide content in that interesting way by being your algorithm. But then the audience can provide content in other ways. They could be cast members. So remember I talked about the private chat, right? So what if natural language, really tricky problem to solve, but what if you are prompting someone in the audience with phrases like, you know, we don't have enough gold or whatever, you know, just blah. And then you give them a script, and then they've got to type back the script, and all of a sudden they can act out as an NPC and give an NPC life. What if you made just one of the audience members, you know, a shopkeeper, and you say, well, here's the shopkeeper's inventory, and it's going to work on your betting gold, so you better be a good shopkeeper, but now you bargain with the player. You know, there's a lot of interesting things you can do there. The future can go even wilder. You can put a web link in chat, and you could onboard the chat experience onto a different type of interaction, you know, a web-based interaction, all sorts. If you're doing a companion app, there's no reason everything we've talked here can't just go into the companion app. You know, you've done the work anyway. Just think of it as a SOFA version of your audience. REST API, so over the pond, you know, UK, America, all that. If you're doing a FIFA game, or if you're doing a car game or whatever, and you've got like a league or something that can happen over a few days or weeks or whatever, in the downtime between streams, you could have people interact. So let's say someone's playing an RPG, and in the downtime you're voting up on which monsters are going to get spawned more, or you're voting up on, you know, replays of the match, how well they did, or things like that. Persistence is really the core to this kind of design, remembering that memory is cheap and we can design persistent kind of systems. Finally, people as scoring is one of the more interesting game design mechanics I've seen emerge in recent years. Cards Against Humanity uses it to great effect. So basically, in Cards Against Humanity, you get a black card that has a question on, or a blank statement on, something like, what ruined the school trip? And everyone else plays, so one person plays the black card, and everyone else plays a white card that says something like, oh, a broken tire, or a mauling bear, or you know, an angry school teacher, or Gary Glitter. And basically what happens then is the person who played the black card selects what they think is the funniest or the best response to that. So to codify that into terms that a computer could understand would be extremely difficult. But using a human as the judge mechanic is something that's very easy. It's something people understand. Something more and more board games and card games have taken advantage of to compete with video games. So if you're doing the next Tony Hawk, you know, you could have a computer score the player, or you could just ask the audience if they're streaming, you know, how sick was that combo, you know, and just get that kind of gauging from the audience. You get a much more interesting response, you know, rather than gamifiable systems. You'd actually have the audience going, wow, that's really cool, or the audience going, oh, you're grinding again. So there's a whole bunch of interesting mechanics you could explore. But finally, the purple rule. Everything will be perverted. Remember that. And I don't say that to discourage you. I say that to encourage you. Because when you're in that design meeting, someone is going to say, if we do this, someone's going to make a penis. And you've just got to embrace that. You've got to put in moderation tools. You've got to give the ability for users to block or to report content. You've got to be aware of managing that. You know, you can't ignore that things will be perverted. Things are going to be perverted. So give the players the tools. If you have any kind of support network, you know, put your support network on that. But don't kill your designs because of fear. Let your designs flourish online. Embrace the community and don't try over-regulate it, because when you put too many systems in place, that's just when your game will die on the vine. So finally, I'm Claire Blackshaw. I'm on Google+, Twitter, and that's my website. You know, fire over a question if you have anything from here. This is pretty much the talk I gave at Develop. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, fire over. Always really interested to hear feedback. You could also drop it in the comments just below.